Me and him were potentially we're potentially going to go to MiBR together last year. I just got the call from Loud. It's like, man, I can't turn this opportunity down, right? So Saadhak is like, I've always joked, he's like a mad scientist. Like, this guy's always cooking and wanting to have crazy ideas with comps. And I mean, honestly, the first thing I focused on was understanding the language. I had no idea what was going on those first couple scrims, So I was like, man, what's happening here? I understand exactly what it's like to be that 16, 17-year-old up-and-coming player that's showcasing your talent to the world and dominating rounds. So yeah, I mean, our expectations are to win.
What's up, everybody? Back with another episode of the podcast. This time I have the one and only fRoD, the current new head coach of MiBR. We'll get into that a little bit. You have a long and storied career in FPS games, dating all the way back to some of my favorites, like the original Counter-Strike, a little FY Ice World, CS Assault. Played those back in the day when my parents wouldn't let me go over to a friend's house and sneak in a few games of killing
the struggle.
So yeah, I have a bunch of coaching questions for you and just want to learn a little bit about your journey in esports, and I think this is going to be super informative to a lot of people out there. So let's just go ahead and get into it. First of all, how are you doing today, and where are you currently?
Doing good, man. Appreciate you having me on. Right now, I'm in Sao Paulo at the MiBR offices. Been here for a couple weeks now. Have a couple more weeks to go. We're just doing like a pretty long boot camp. Really just focused on the creation of our identity when it comes to our composition, strategies, getting to know each other, getting to understand how we work. For me, it's also a great way to get an understanding of how these guys react, how they play. I'm a guy that really likes to focus on teaching people lessons and like concepts and things like that. And everyone learns differently. So me being here in person, getting to understand how these guys operate individually as well as a team is really, really huge for me. So I can get that opportunity to understand how they work and basically just spend this time together before the holiday season, before we got to head out to LA. So just really taking advantage of all the time we got right now.
Sweet. So I guess you kind of already started touching on it there, but I would always be curious what like a coach's philosophy is. Like, what do you think your actual job, if you had to define what a coach does in Valorant, what would you specifically from your own personal viewpoint say that your job is as a coach in this game?
Man, that's a good question. I think you got to be kind of dynamic and do a little bit of everything. You kind of have to understand how your players are, and maybe if you have an IGL who is super tactical oriented, then you kind of just be there to assist, and you do maybe some more of like the managerial tasks. Or if you have an IGL that say is more of like a strat caller that kind of picks strats out of a hat, then it's my job to fill that hat with a bunch of strategies and a bunch of ideas and have them kind of expand their potential and their tactical mindset. So it's really a little bit of everything. We have a lot of managerial type duties where we got to book practices, record scrims, upload review VODs and stuff like that. But for me, for the most part, I'm pretty tactical when it comes to my approach to FPS and Valorant especially. So I think a big portion of what I do specifically, especially now having a really, really good coach with me in Bazooka, is really just focusing on the tactical side of things, the development of the players, development of our identity as a team, and really just trying to optimize our process to make sure that we're putting forth our best effort every single day. And just making sure that we're kind of on top of the guys to make sure that they're on time, practicing hard, working on the right things. So it's kind of more of like a providing that proper guidance for these players, but you also got to be very dynamic to understand that some players need different things. Sometimes you have players that have a little bit less experience or need more guidance, and sometimes you have veterans that don't need as much. So I think it's really just getting a good understanding of how everyone likes to work and trying to be very open-minded as to how we can assist the team and develop the team as well as the players individually.
Makes sense to me. So there's a bunch of things to unpack in there, and I guess the first one that I want to touch on is obviously you've been playing and working in competitive FPS for a long time at this point. When did it sort of click for you, like the importance of a coach? Because you obviously saw it from like the player side and then transitioned into being a coach during, I guess it was during CSGO is when you actually made that switch,
Yeah,
right? And so having seen that sort of relationship of player coach from both sides, where did you kind of see like, okay, a coach actually does have value in this game? And I like, how was that transition for you as going from a player to a coach, and how hard was it to kind of like figure out where your sort of like relationship goes as a coach in that space? Yeah, just talk to me a little bit about that transition of going into
Yeah.
being a coach from a player.
Yeah. So during the majority of the time that I was a professional player, I spent on Complexity, which was a very dominant team, probably the best team in the history of 1.6 in North America, and we were one of the best teams in the world, won multiple majors, and we were very hardcore. We kind of brought like a very sports, like baseball, basketball, football kind of mindset to the team. We had no coaches back in the day, so basically, we did everything as a unit. We created the strategies. We made our tactical books. We
Was this
reviewed
when
other
Jason Lake was like
teams.
standing behind you guys yelling and stuff
Yeah,
like that? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, all the way back in the day. So, we kind of brought that. We kind of had that mentality. It actually was more created and rooted in United Five, which was a team right before Complexity. It's just that team kind of died out. Then we ended up the core of that team went to Complexity. We brought a couple other dudes, from different teams, and we kind of had that mindset. But originally, it was more like United Five slash Complexity. Um, and because of that, I just, I felt like that was a huge part of our success because a lot of teams weren't really so tactically focused, weren't approaching video games like if it was a real sport, just from the analytical side of how we study other teams, prepare, create our strategies, all that stuff. And what I realized is maybe like in the mid 2010s, when I was already kind of out of the scene, is that's basically what the coach did.
Mm,
So my approach was more of, okay, just do what I did as a pro player into the coaching side because, like I said, I was a heavy fragger, but there was a brain behind the aim back in the day, and a lot of it came from the tactical stuff that we did, the reviews that we did, and also the IGLs that I had that were very focused on that and very focused on the fundamentals and trying to create like good habits, practicing hard, all these things. And um, I'm not saying that players don't have that right now. It's just as a unit, it's hard to get five guys to be on that kind of same page just in general.
sure.
So most of those things have been moved over to the responsibility of a coach, an analyst, assistant coaches, and things like that. So for me, it's really not that big of a deal because I've always understood the importance of these things I feel like it's an absolute necessity to have these things in a team. And then if players kind of want some of this stuff to be a little bit more spoon fed for them, then it's not a problem. I think that that's great because basically gaming was just so fresh and so new back in the day. There wasn't coaches, there wasn't managers, there wasn't analysts, things like that. And I think for me, for gaming to become more of a, you know, uh, like a reality about like respected and treated like somewhat of a sport, you kind of have to have that staff, and those staff has to have the direction and importance. And I think it's also good that coaches can provide that. I think, for me personally, I do like to teach my players that kind of old school mindset because I want everyone to be involved. I want everyone to be kind of nerds of the game,
Mm,
just studying your team and reviewing tape because I feel like that's what all the best players, even in sports, do. Like guys like Tom Brady, everyone, like they just watch tape all day and trying to break down other teams. So I think for me, it's kind of implementing that mindset, but also understanding that that is my job to do. So no problem, I'll take care of it. But kind of showing them the how and the why is kind of more important too because we want them to understand like how coaches operate and how we can add value, and also if they want to get involved in some of these things, it's only going to help them. It's not going to hurt.
right. Yeah, 100%. And that workload, especially in a game like this, which is potentially ever changing with all the new agents and stuff that are being implemented.
Yeah, and no,
Um,
when you're in a tournament, man, it's
yeah,
really tough. Like you have like new matches, new team. You don't know who your opponent is. You have to create game plans, new strats, new everything like within 24 hours. So it really does become a challenge, and that's why I think staffs are important because if these players need rest sometimes, and they got to
yeah.
keep their minds, their eyes fresh. I totally understand that side of it. So just let the coaches kind of take care of the brunt of all the stuff that needs to do for the prep of the team.
Makes sense. And then speaking of coaches, you went to MIBR this year. The offseason was pretty crazy for coaches overall. I mean, lots of teams obviously shuffling the rosters, but lots of coaches moving regions, moving teams. Um, So you are now reunited with Bazooka, which obviously you first went to Brazil to join Loud for their Champions run when Bazooka was the head coach, and you were an analyst there, right, or assistant coach, something like that.
Yeah, I was an analyst. I mean, I basically provided all the pistol rounds,
Hmm.
the game plans, anti-strats, certain concepts of how to play against certain teams, how to beat certain teams, and how to prepare against some teams that are maybe more anti-strat focused, maybe how they like slow default too much. So just really kind of providing a lot of that like tactical depth that they really were missing out on. And like I was saying earlier, it's just really hard. Like you got someone like Bazooka who's just like flying with the team, traveling all over the world, uh, playing tournaments nonstop, different opponents. Like you kind of need some of that help, and he was alone in that process. So just really providing that and giving a lot of extra stuff, and they ended up using and doing most of it, which was fantastic. I didn't even think that they would do everything. So for me, I was really excited to see that some of the work that I was doing without really even knowing the guys. They were having that faith in me, and it ended up paying off.
Awesome. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that Champions run. You were you eventually there in Brazil for champs, or was it just purely remote for
No,
the entire?
so the Istanbul when it was in 2022. Is that what you're
Oh,
talking
that's
about?
right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I never went. I was
Okay.
just working remote from Florida, and that kind of worked out great because when their day was over, and they knew they had an opponent, it was like the night for them, and it was daytime for me. So
Oh, right,
Bazooka
right,
would
right.
kind of give me like some direction, like, hey, I need a game plan against Optic, need pistol rounds, need certain things, and I'll be like, no problem, get some rest. You'll have it when you wake up, and just knock it out. And when they woke up, they had everything they needed. So the actual time zone difference worked out completely in my favor there because I bet if I was with the boys and then have to spend all those hours after the matches
Right.
and everything, I'd probably be drained. Um, so I think that that actually worked out hugely in our favor to be able to kind of provide that because, like I said, I would just do what he would want me to do, and then I just provide extra things, and having that extra time and that daylight, and even just the nighttime to myself to kind of really think, I was able to really provide them a lot of different ideas that they can, when they wake up, they pretty much have whatever they needed and more.
Makes sense. And so from that relationship that you built with Bazooka during that analyst thing, obviously he saw probably quite a bit of value. The org saw a bunch of value for you from you. They hired you for all of last season off of that. And we'll get to the Loud of last year in a little bit, but I did want to talk a little bit more about this offseason and Bazooka specifically. I would have to imagine that he's one of the main reasons that you wanted to stay in Brazil. I would have to imagine that you had quite a few offers from various teams all over the place this offseason, since a lot of teams were looking for coaches, and your results, I think, at this point, for anybody who knows and really follows the scene, are pretty undeniable. So, was kind of Bazooka a big factor for you wanting to go to MIBR and stay in Brazil and the Americas League?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, truth be told, me and him were potentially going to go to MIBR together last year. I just
Mm.
got the call from Loud. It's like, man, I can't turn this opportunity down, right? So, it kind of sucked to kind of have to part ways in that same way, but he totally understood, and it was a completely respectful thing. I would never have imagined like taking his position there.
Mhm.
But things happen. And he was very happy for me, and I had to take that opportunity. When it comes to this year, truth be told as well, I didn't really get any offers, and not because I don't think anyone was interested. I just never put myself out there.
Mhm.
My goal was to stay with Loud. I think that our relationship was fantastic, and I was really hoping for that to be the case. When things started going a little bit south, and kind of realized that it may not come to fruition, I had already spoken to Bazooka, and he let me know doors are wide open for you. So basically, got the word that I wasn't going to be with Loud anymore. And within 24 hours, I pretty much agreed and signed with MIBR and started my negotiation process with them. So I never really put myself out there to receive any offers. I'm sure there was some other teams that would have been interested. I just didn't really put myself out there to kind of do that because, as I said, I really wanted to stay in Loud, and then I also wanted to. When that didn't happen, I wanted to go with Bazooka, which was my plan for last year, anyways. Um, and I love the region. For me, becoming trilingual is something that's always been like a personal goal of mine. So even just staying and continuing to fortify my ability to speak Portuguese, I think was something like a personal goal of mine as well. So really wanted to stay in the region. I think I've built quite a name for myself down here, and they've treated me so kindly, and everyone's so nice. So I just really love like the culture, and I feel like it's a really good fit, especially because I'm Cuban American. Family doesn't really speak much English, so
Mhm.
I think we kind of have the same kind of vibes, like music tastes and everything like that.
Sure.
Food, everything is very similar. Where it's really not that different, you know.
Cool. Cool. That's awesome. Um, Also, I would have to imagine there's a little bit of at this point for you kind of excitement to like build a team that didn't do so well last year, and because I don't know, for me as a coach, I guess I would want a little bit of coming into a team that has like, you know, these superstar players, that has like this foundation, because it's like, oh well, it's like getting the keys to a sports car to some extent, but there's also that like a lot of the, I guess, the accolades will go to the players. Oh, they're already good. You know, what is the coach actually doing? And now you have an opportunity to come into a team that had a pretty awful 2023 and really kind of be like, all right, you know, this is the impact that I can have when I have, you know, a group of sort of unproven players. It's not that these guys don't have names and didn't have, you know, some standout performances last year, but I think everybody would kind of agree that a lot of the MIBR players that you have to work with this year are not necessarily the ones that you would recognize from Brazil. So you kind of have this opportunity to like build this new team, I guess, in your image, or at least sort of like showcase the strengths that these different players have. Is that something that kind of like drives you this year of like, let's see what we can actually build from the ground up?
Yeah, for sure. For me, like Brazil is a FPS rich region.
Mm,
They're amazing in a lot of different FPS, from like mobile games to Counter Strike to Valorant to Crossfire, like all these games. And for me, I mean, that's part of it. Obviously, I do want to like. I don't. To me, the players that I have on the team is not like a big focus of mine like that. Um, I think I could add value to the best team in the world, even to the worst team in the world. And I'm very confident in what I do. I think everyone who's kind of worked with me, especially my previous team, they understand the value I bring regardless of the personalities or players that are on the team. So I'm not really here to like prove myself like that. I think that the work that I've done throughout my career has kind of spoken that for me. But yeah, it is also, it's not like it's not a bad thing either, right? Like I think that it could really showcase the kind of value that I bring, especially to the public eye, which doesn't hurt for people to
mm,
kind of see that. But I think the people that are around me that have worked with me, that kind of seen my work, they understand that I could add value wherever I'm at. And that just comes with the confidence and the hard work that I put in, because I really do work hard for the boys and make sure that I'm always trying to be there for them and creating new ideas, providing different ideas, things like that. So yeah, it's good, but we're in a team game, so I'm not really looking for too much of those like personal type stuff. But in some world, it does it does help that I can provide that sort of guidance to a team, because even if the public has some sort of perception about the boys, it is my job to prove those guys wrong. So
right.
yeah, definitely want to do my part in making this team much better than they were, and I feel like we're on the right path for doing that.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see what happens this year. This year is going to be really interesting with all the shuffles that happen. So I think it's every league is kind of wide open at this point. But let's go ahead and take a step back in history. And let's talk about the move to Loud, going in, becoming the head coach for 2023, and sort of having to do a little bit of rebuilding with that team. Obviously, Saucy and Pancata left to go to Sentinels, so you're left with Saadhak, Les, Aspas, and then two young guys, which were Tuyz and Kaunzin. Um, so how was it kind of stepping into that head coaching role, knowing that you have to now develop some talent, but knowing that you have some pieces to build around as well? Um, what was, I guess, like maybe the first thing that you focused on with that new group?
I mean, honestly, the first thing I focused on was understanding the language. I had no idea what was going on those first couple
Sure.
scrims, you know? So I was like, man, what's
Yeah.
happening here? But then I slowly started realizing, like, obviously I knew how close Portuguese was to Spanish, so it didn't take me that long. And there's like a little bit of that shy element that it's like, man, I don't know if I'm even saying things correctly. So it
Right.
took me a little like a personal thing to kind of get over that. And I think that really only took a few weeks because really, I was gonna kind of impose myself anyways. I just was really hoping the guys would understand me. And my assistant coach at the time, SDK, is a great guy, and part of what he was there for too was to make sure that any messaging I had and conversations, he'd kind of guide them in the right direction to make sure the translations were good because we talk a lot about theory and stuff like that. So there's some players that do speak English or understand English on the team, so that really helped me on the personal development side. Guys like Saadhak speak amazing English. Aspas has been developing his English for a couple years now and speaks it very well and has always really understood it. So I think it was for me, it was good. It was a great transition in that sense because these guys, I won my first major before some of them were even born, right? So
Right.
I think that they have, and I retired also when they were like not even teenagers. So I think these guys have no idea like really what I did or accomplished in my playing career. So the respect I was able to get from them prior to joining as the official head coach and maintaining myself as a head coach, that respect came through the work and the things that I did for them on a day to day, not from my past.
Right.
So for me, I was really excited about that because I think that when they saw the work that I was able to do for them in Champs 2022, they were able to realize like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. Who cares like really what he's done or whatever? Like as current day, this guy knows what he's doing. So I think that that really helped me a lot, and I felt like it was an exciting process to be able to be with a couple guys that had already won champions and were developing themselves, even though they were very young and still needed a lot of development. They were so talented and skilled that they were able to become champions. And then you have a couple young guns, one's transitioning roles, one's coming in as like the next up in that sort of position, like Gawan. So it was really of a challenge to be able to understand the language and then also be able to teach the lessons individually to some of these guys because where it came to the champion core of Saadhak, Les, and Aspas, it was more of fine tuning some of the things they needed to fix. When it came to the other guys, it was more like teaching them from the ground up some of these things, and especially for Tuyz, who was going from a duelist to a controller role. So
Hmm.
it was quite a challenge, but I think that that's what helped us become like a really good team off the bat, is because we were just really focused on practicing and the development of each and every individual, as well as kind of creating some sort of identity as a team where it was kind of by accident in a way how I was able to come up with some of these compositions that really ended up paying off for us. And it ended up working, especially with the, I think the kind of, I think big factor was kind of like the approach I had on the compositions, which was mostly to make sure that my guys were set up in the best position they could be successful at. Who the hell knew that Harbor Viper Sky was going to be so dominant? But I knew it would be good for us because of the players we had and the kind of play style we had. So I think it ended up paying off, and I think that's why you saw Loud have such a successful year with those kind of compositions, and some teams kind of struggling a little bit because maybe their team makeup didn't have the right players to play the right roles. Where we did it for those reasons.
God, you're making my job so easy because I was just about to go in this direction with the conversation
Yeah,
anyway.
there's
So
more. There's more there, but ask away. Ask away.
cool. So yeah, I do want to talk about the compositions and the meta and that kind of stuff. The Harbor Viper, I think up until you guys really showed it off at LOCKIN, everybody was kind of just assuming that Harbor was a very mediocre to bad agent in the pool. And so I wanted to get your thoughts a little bit about, like, first of all, how did that composition come to be? And then second of all, which is maybe a bit more of a in-depth question. You know what? Let's just ask about that first, and then I'll go a little bit
Yeah, yeah.
deeper into the agent stuff.
So Sadak is like, I've always joked, he's like a mad scientist. Like this guy's always cooking and wanting to have crazy ideas with comps, and not necessarily saying that we're gonna put it to fruition, but more of like we theory craft a lot. We'll like sit down, talk about like, man, is this gonna be work? Is this gonna work? And that kind of how it all started is like, hey man, he kind of mentioned to me that Harbor seems like a pretty good agent, has like some pretty cool abilities like that. Like, let's see if we can kind of make it work. So when I was still in Florida, I was playing ranked with like 120 ping on an alt account in Brazil, just to really play
Hmm.
some games. And I was dual queuing a lot with Tuyz, just to kind of see how things go. And we started getting into different maps like Fracture and stuff like that, and we realized like, man, if you got to play like Brimstone and you throw one set of smokes on B, like you're screwed if you don't plant the bomb in those moments, right? So
Right.
that's where some cases guys agents like Viper became viable, because maybe you could just put the wall and bring it up, bring it down as you need. And then we're like, man, if we could put that Viper wall up the whole entire time, and then if you can bring it down and put harbor stuff, and then by the time the harbor stuff goes down, the Viper stuff is back. We're like, oh shit, we got smokes for days out here. So it kind of just like happened by accident. We're like, because a lot of the guys didn't really have like that much CS background and fundamentals, so it was my job to kind of teach them that. And we talked about certain concepts like how smokes are so important, but if you got Brim or you got Omen, like you got 3-4 smokes like around, that's it. And basically you cover 3 or 4 spots total the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
When you got a Viper wall, like especially on Fracture as an example, you cover 2 spots and it goes up, down, up, down. That's 6 times it covers those spots. Then you got Harbor doing the same thing on the cooldown wall, that you can cover it like at least 2-3 times around. That's like 12, 14 smokes and a bunch of. So for me, it just made so much sense that like these guys are good. Like Viper, you kind of put your wall or your smoke, and it's really difficult to kind of move it around at that point. So it kind of becomes semi-obvious like what you're gonna do when you lay down your Viper util. But Harbor, you can make those walls and replenish it exactly like Viper can, or you can make your own wherever you need to, and it has a cascade that you can kind of throw out as well. So it just kind of became this situation of like, oh man, like we can really like cover 14, 15 spots around versus 3 to 4 with
Right.
like one smoker or something like that. So for me, it started slowly. It came out through the ranks of like 120 ping of me playing with one of my guys, just kind of really testing this out. And then we started realizing too, like, okay, Sova's kind of in the meta, Fade is kind of in the meta, all these like recon abilities. And then you're like, man, but these walls are kind of counters to these recons.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, it kind of nullifies that. We got to maybe look at getting out of this. And it's like, what would be the perceived weakness of these comps? Just popping through walls, right? Like, so it's like, so what's the natural replacement? An initiator like a Sky or a KO. But then if you're going to take away the Sova, it's like KO is not going to get you the kind of consistent information that Sky does.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Sky became kind of, in my mind, meta for that composition, because you can supplement the Sova by getting information. You could also do some plays like popping through walls and things like that. So it just kind of birthed out of ranked and necessity, but also like the necessity of what agents may complement or may not work so well. Because like obviously all the initiators got nerfed to the ground like right before this time, so even agents like Breach did not become as viable. But if you think about it too, and you saw some of our games on Haven, we would put down specific walls that would make breach flashes useless, because it'd have to go through a wall, and then we have our wall with like a little layer of spacing in between. It's like
Right.
breach becomes like practically useless if properly placing walls and harbor utility and stuff like that. So I felt like it was just such a good fit for that. And obviously you don't have like those damage abilities and stun abilities and things like that, but I've always kind of said to the boys like information is key, and as long as we have info, we can make plays and make. Oh, sorry. It kind of transitioned from like let's not focus so much on damage and let's focus more on info. I've always felt as players get better and better in this game, like at the pro level, you can't get a recon ping. It's almost impossible. You can't
Right.
really get damage from a raise nade because everyone knows how to avoid it. But if comboed with something, now we're on the same. Now we can get a ping off. Now we can get some raised damage if we have like a stun or some Astra abilities and things like that. So I think as you kind of elevate yourself on the pro level, you got to realize like how strong combinations are. And with Harbor Viper Sky, things like that is not really like combo. They're a little bit more independent in that case, which allows us a little bit more individual freedom to kind of make some moves.
Makes sense. Man, you are just speaking my language. So I come from like a Dota 2 background initially.
Love that game.
That was the game that I was into before Valorant. And that game is all about the combinations of the characters. And so that's where I really got interested in Valorant. I was like, oh, okay, so we've got, the FPS stuff, but we also have this whole other side of things that people are not really going to be talking about. So I'm curious where your sort of intuition on these agent combinations and stuff comes from, since you do have such a long background in CS. And To be perfectly honest, I'm often pretty derogatory of my view towards a lot of CS people because I think it comes from a very like you just rely on the tac fundamentals. You rely on like the
Yeah,
very
yeah.
basics of playing tac FPS, smokes, flashes, that's all we really need. But there's so many layers to this game. And for whatever reason, despite having more experience in CS than everybody else, you are like one of the innovators about using like the agent tools that they give you in Valorant. So where did that even come from? Like why are
Yeah.
you one of the innovators?
I'll give two things. One from like a personal professional career. Like I was a pro player, like a signed contracted top CS player when I was like 15, 16 years old. So I've gone through all the phases of the game, and if I was able to maintain myself at the top, I had to understand how things transition, how metas change, and have a completely open mind. Because I came into a game being a 15, 16-year-old pro playing against 20, 23, 24-year-olds that kind of had like their set way of stuff. And I was one that came in and changed the game on how to play the op and different things like that. So I always kind of had that open mindset as a player to really adapt. And I would say the other thing that not many people know about this, I was a professional, like when I was a professional Counter-Strike 1.6 player, winning big tournaments and stuff. I was also a Call of Duty professional on PC and won a league playing that. I was a invite
Okay.
level Day of Defeat player. I also, after Counter-Strike, I had a little stint in Overwatch as well where I played. So for me, I'm a big FPS guy. I'm not really necessarily, like, obviously Counter-Strike is what cemented my legacy and kind of my accomplishments, but yeah, I was professional Call of Duty at the same time. I remember Complexity kind of being upset about that. That I was like, the hell, like you're gonna leave practice with our like you're gonna finish practice with our team and then go practice with your other teams. Like, yeah, man, I love Call of Duty. It was Call of Duty 1, like before Call of Duty
Mhm.
2 even came out on so it was more of like I just love playing all those games. Like my local buddies that I played with and kind of grew up playing CS with, they were Day of Defeat invite level players, and I
Okay.
would play with them too. So for me, I just loved FPS games. Whenever I found FPS games when I was like a Warcraft StarCraft player, like in my early teens, I was like, holy crap, this is like a whole new world. Like, could move my
Right.
mouse and the crosshair moves. I was like, whoa. And then yeah, it just uh, it kind of transitions. I'm obviously like I said, I made my career through CS, and everyone knows me for that, especially for having a long career and a pretty solid career for the 10 plus years I played. But I was definitely like invite level in other games. I won a league in Call of Duty at the same time I was on Complexity, so I wasn't one of those guys that I had that kind of ability to do what some of these FPS guys say they could do now. I was doing that way back in the day, and I was actually winning in both games, not just like competitive in some of the games.
Mhm. So basically, you had the ability to be flexible and adapt to different stuff in different scenarios, and like regardless of what's going on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Makes sense. So as far as the meta goes, then I'm curious whether you feel this way as a viewer, as an analyst. I am always just bored and upset when I just see, okay, you've got like two or three teams that come up with a comp on a map and it works for them, and then everybody else just copies them. And so I I know that you like to innovate and be creative in this stuff, but how important is it to be the meta leader in this game? And also, what is your view of the teams that seem to just kind of like do what the top teams are doing?
Yeah, it's huge. And I was actually just having a conversation with one of my guys about this. It's one thing to be the innovators, and it's one thing to be the guys that are kind of copying what other people are doing. The reason why it's so important is because we're the ones that create the concepts behind what we do. Other
Right.
teams just see maybe more like the physical. They look at radar, they look at like what the micro level of things are, and they're like, okay, you know, there's a wall here, like let's just go. They just don't know why the wall's there. They don't know why certain things are played in certain ways. So um, not only did we spend more time than anyone playing this, but we also understand the weaknesses and the strengths more than anyone simply because we're the ones that created it. And for me, the one that was really, really leading the pace when it came to some of these compositions with the team, uh, you know, I spent most of my time thinking about like the way that I like to work is backwards. I like to think about like the weaknesses before I like to think about the strengths because you can always cover up the strengths or the weaknesses by how you play.
Mhm.
But when you look at the weaknesses of things, you kind of could see like if this is good, if this has potential long term, and what could we do to kind of improve on these weaknesses? Because I've always felt like as a pro player, if we're like self aware enough about what our weaknesses are, then we can kind of work on them and make turn our weaknesses into strengths, and hopefully one day we become like an overall good team, overall good player when we. Work on those weaknesses because our strengths should always be there because we kind of fine tune those things on a day to day. But if we work really hard on our weaknesses, and I think that that's something that's very huge. And I think that that's the thing that people don't really understand. And also, I didn't like just wake up one day and think about this kind of composition. A lot of it was catered to the kind of players that we had on the team.
Hmm.
Some teams don't have the players that can play certain agents and understand certain roles. I was very blessed enough to have guys on Loud that are very flexible, but also guys that, like I said, this kind of composition worked perfectly. Guys like Gawang, he was an amazing Silva player, but I realized like this kid's got insane talent, insane aim. I don't want to force him to like be with abilities in his hand. I want him to just pop flash and go get kills, like kind of
Hmm.
play like Sky, like the NA players do, which is like a quasi duelist. So I think a lot of it was birthed in putting the strengths to my players, and like I said, other teams don't understand the concepts as to the why we do the things we do, how we can continue to evolve them, and then also they may not have the player makeup to be able to make these things work. And um, these things take time. You need to understand certain things. You need to understand the weaknesses. Every time you lose a scrim or lose some sort of retake or whatever, you're like, okay, maybe if I could change this and I edit that. So it's like sometimes you got to take L's to be able to get those W's. And I think a lot of teams, they were taking those L's while they were playing us or while they were, um, watching us live on stage, and we had been taking those L's in practice just to kind of fine tune
Hmm.
it. So a lot of it really just came up from like on the day to day side of things, and we spent so much time evolving that composition that we knew that we were always going to be in the lead, simply because we had already gone through the fire on most of the things that we knew that were good and bad. And
Sure.
when we played against teams that were playing against the same thing, like we just exploited a lot of the weaknesses of it. And like I said, we knew those better than
Right.
everyone else.
Yeah, you already know all the weaknesses, so you can
Yeah,
really
yeah.
press them on those. How hard is it to sell some of these players on like a new idea? Because I would imagine, it's so easy to just do what everybody else is doing. Like there's a roadmap for you. There's like 5,000 million VODs of playing the Ascent comp on Ascent. So when you are introducing a new agent, um, I would imagine that there's quite a bit of pushback, especially from some of the younger guys that maybe don't understand like the nuances of like introducing this agent, which causes all these other problems and gives us these tools to work with. How do you go about you know getting through, I guess, probably those first couple of weeks of awkward play, because it's going to change how everybody thinks and it's not going to feel good, and people are going to be like dying in situations where they're like, well, if I was just playing a jet here instead of this, like it would be so much easier to
Yeah,
play
yeah.
the game, right?
I think a lot of it is like respect and faith. I was very lucky enough to have these guys respect my work, especially from just like an outside perspective, being an analyst. That I was like, okay, this guy was able to provide us some stuff. Let's see what he's up to.
Mhm.
And also one of these like, just have faith. Like I'm gonna make sure that we're gonna improve and we're gonna make micro adaptations to like what we got to do. And like I said, we started with Harbor Viper Sova, and that's what I was like. Okay, we got to tweak this. We got to tweak that.
Mhm.
And once we got to some sort of perfect balance, I felt like that's where everyone started to really see the light and understand like, oh crap, like we're onto something. And then other teams like say for example Furia, they started copying our stuff really early on, and they didn't really have the kind of success we did, and we kind of realized that if we kind of set the pace, doing what we're doing, we're always going to be ahead of people because people are going to try and copy what we're doing because we're dominant on it, but also they're never going to understand the why, which is what we spoke about previously. So I
Mhm.
felt like we were always going to have a leg up on that. And like I said, these compositions and these things were made out of the understanding of how my players like to play, not necessarily what we think is like this is plug and play, right?
Mhm.
So I think that this game is so unique, and updates and new agents and things happen all the time that you have to have an open mind, but also understand like how to create compositions and how how to kind of fine tune them for your squad, for the players that you have on the team.
Right. And you keep touching on that point, which I've also been a huge believer in from the beginning, which is that certain like personality types lend themselves to playing certain roles and certain agents. And it seems that you kind of maybe agree on something like that. And it
Yeah,
really is
totally.
about getting your players on what is the most comfortable thing for them, even if it's not necessarily like the quote unquote optimal agent, for example. So like something on Reyna for Paper X, like that's an agent everybody just
Yeah.
ubiquitously thinks is trash. But the way that he plays it is just so unique that allows him to get value out of something, and probably more value than just putting him on, I don't know, let's say like stick him on KO, but it just doesn't fit his play style. So is that something that you are a
Yeah,
big believer in?
totally, totally. I mean, I think that that's why you see teams like Paper X have such success, because what they're doing is catered for them and who they have on the team.
Hmm.
I think if you were to put Ben Kai in there over something, there's no chance that they're going to do that, because they just don't have the players. They don't have like that double duelist type strength. You take Ben Kai out of the equation, you put some crazy amazing player like something in the mix, like you're allowed to do these things. And if you were to just like plug and play something into what say Ben Kai was doing, it would just never work.
Hmm.
So I think that it's very intelligent of guys like Alex to be able to kind of fine tune these things. And you end up having the same situation as we did, where it's like people fall into the trap of thinking that this is what plug and play meta is, and the reality is that this is just what's strong for the players that you have on your team.
Hmm.
So it's all about creating your own identity and understanding who you have on board. And I think that that's the reason why teams like Loud and teams like Paper X were able to have so much success, because we didn't follow the pace when it came to anything. We just kind of did our own thing and was creating most, if not all, the compositions with the mindset of like, this is what works best for our team. You got someone like Aspas, who's like probably one of the best jets in the world. It's almost criminal to like not have him play that. When you
Right.
have guys like Saadhak and Les, who are like amazing flex type players, it's like those guys can play Killjoy Viper and interchange, no problem. uh Tuyz was like the easiest one. He didn't even understand the role. So as he was learning how to play a controller, it was like, just learn to play
Oh, that's
controller
why he
and
was
play
so good
Harbor.
at Harbor, is because he
Yeah,
was totally new to the
yeah.
role and he
There
just played it how he wanted to.
Yeah, you didn't have to like rewire anything. You just had to teach them
Okay,
from
that
the
makes
ground
sense.
up. So sometimes you have players that you have to rewire some understandings of the games. He hit like a full reset in his mind. He's like, I'm not playing the duelist side, putting that away. I'm gonna be a controller now. It's like, just teach him from the ground up. It's like there's no difference of starting him on Harbor or Omen. Guy really doesn't understand the role from day one, right? So it's my job to teach him that role, but it's also he has a fresh perspective on how he views the game, that he's not gonna come in with like some preset things and some bad habits to break. The kid was like ready to go. And then Gawang is just like an uber talent that can play kind of anything and loves those initiator roles. So like I said, it's a lot of it of understanding of who you got on the team and trying to put those guys individually in a way in a position to succeed.
Sure, sure. So, I would imagine there's a little bit of anxiety though when you do have like this new comp that you're working on and you got to take it to officials for the first time, and you guys kind of unveiled this at Lock-In. Um, what was that like when you got your first couple of wins with the Harbor Viper? Where you're like, okay, so our ideas are correct. And what map did you start on with the Harbor Viper? Because eventually you kind of expanded to basically just playing it on everything.
Well, we permabanned Haven,
Mhm,
and it had nothing to do, like, I think I think Loud's like 11-0 in 2 years on Haven. So
mhm,
I don't think we came into the mindset of like, oh, Haven sucks. We kind of went in there with like the Haven seems like everyone's strongest map. Let's just remove everyone's strongest map and kind of level the map pool a little bit. Um, but we have been practicing this Harbor Viper stuff a lot in Brazil. We were starting to like get stronger and stronger and kind of really dominate on it. And then we shut it down where we basically weren't really scrimming teams in Brazil anymore, just because we kind of already played them. And one of the things that I wanted to implement, actually, which we kept through pretty much the whole entire year, was we never scrim franchise teams. We never
mhm.
wanted to give anyone an idea of how we play anything in a scrim so they can kind of study that practice. So I think the only time that we ended up scrimming franchise teams was towards champs, because the region like NA was kind of dead. There was
Right.
like no one to play. So it's like I think we ended up scrimming like once Optic got or NRG got eliminated and they were starting to make some tryouts. We ended up scrimming them most of the time, just because like they were always trying to like fix their roster up, right? So um, yeah, we pretty much something I implemented from day one. As once we got to like the end of our like initial Brazil scrimming time, is like, let's just stop playing everyone in franchise. This means we didn't play Furia, MIBR, Crew, Leviathan, any of those guys anymore. And then as we transitioned over to get to um, Americas, like we just did not play any of them ever in a scrim. But the reality is, I think that what really helped for all of us to understand that we were onto something is we had an amazing boot camp for like 2 or 3 weeks in Europe at Casa Esports in Spain,
Mm-hmm.
and before lock-in. So essentially, even though lock-in was a local tournament for us in Sao Paulo, we actually flew in for that tournament because we spent the 2 or 3 weeks prior in Europe. We were doing really really good in the scrims there, and realized like this style of this what we're onto is really really good against certain teams. We played like teams like Vitality, teams like Liquid, and we understood like, oh shit, like we're onto something. So we cut down scrimming those guys and realized like we know like we're onto something. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just a couple weeks from there, we ended up going back to lock-in to Sao Paulo, and the rest is history there. But we kind of had an opportunity to test these things in different regions and realize that we weren't just like dominating our local competition because we felt like maybe we were more talented. It was more like a mix of both where our talent level was really, really high. But when it came to the compositions and the strategies, like, we were really like on the right path for it.
Makes sense. Okay, I could talk to you about comps and theory crafting like for the next 2.5 hours,
Yeah,
but
yeah, absolutely.
let's move on to a few more like more coach centric type of things. So obviously you have this great run at lock-in. Your comp is looking awesome. Everything's going super well. Get to the finals, and then you just have this. I mean, maybe the best series in Valorant, like period, to this point against FNATIC. I'm sure it probably doesn't feel like that to you guys on the
No, no,
losing
it,
end,
it
but
really was good. It really was good.
it was crazy. But losing that in front of the home crowd obviously was probably a huge gut punch to yourself and especially the players. How do you deal with that type of thing, especially with like such a young team, teaching them how to lose? I guess with some grace and this is not the end; it's the beginning of the season. We have so much more time ahead of us now. How do you handle those types of losses as a coach?
I mean, I think some of the guys, even Saadhak has said it many times. He didn't even expect us to get past like the first or second rounds. I
Hmm.
felt like we were kind of like on the right path in the sense of like we far exceeded our expectations, especially with the kind of like rookies we had in the team starting everything. We had a core of players that had just won champions, so they kind of have that championship mentality. And then we had to teach the boys, like you said, like how to lose. I explained to them like some of my history, some of my stories. That's where I like kind of like show my age and just kind of explain to them about like my past is more of like before I won my first major, I made it to a grand finals and got completely deleted from the server. It's like we beat a bunch of amazing teams on the way. We got to the grand finals of a tournament and lost like 13-2 or something like that. Like got murdered. So I was like, it's all about how you take those losses. Like it's gonna hurt. And if it doesn't hurt, you don't care. And everyone was super sad. Everyone like was very emotional about it, especially because we felt like we had that in the bag and we lost in front of our home crowd. Especially for myself, it was an opportunity to like I knew that I provided a lot of value and helped bring champs 2022 to Loud and to Brazil. I wanted to immediately kind of bring a trophy from that head coaching perspective to be like, look, I'm one of the main drivers of what we're doing here and bringing trophies to you guys. So for me, like it was just a big hit on that case because guys like me, Tuyz and Kawang, we wanted to prove ourselves as the new guys in these positions. So everyone individually was hurting, but we went through it all together. We spent a couple weeks here in Brazil after the tournament, just hanging out, getting to know each other more. And I think it was one of those things to realize, like, guys, I don't think anyone expected us to be here. We need to take the successes that we found from this tournament and really drive it home. And then, some of the things that we felt like we were, coming short on, we kind of, I think something that really was a big eye opener for me is these guys they lacked a lot of like fundamentals in the FPS game, like how to play certain things and not Valorant related, just more of like trade fragging, understanding the concepts of defaulting, how to like expand on the defaulting, double lurking, things like that, when to lurk, do these things. So I realized that as much as we can focus on compositions and strategy on Valorant and to really innovate that way, there's also a lot of things that we have to learn from the beginning that kind of give other teams a natural advantage. When you look at teams like Optic of the past and
Hmm.
Energy, they just have such deep-rooted fundamentals in CS and gaming in general that if they transition that over to Valorant, they already have a leg up on everyone. Until then they have to just work on the Valorant side of things, right? I think that I realized that these guys were just pretty much all Valorant type players, and we had to work on the other side of things. Which for me, that was the easy part because those are things that you can fix and like talk about while we're grabbing a meal or something like that. Because you can't really show it too much in Valorant. You got to really explain it. I ended up writing like a little guide in Portuguese or in English, and I translated it to Portuguese because I had done a guide a long time ago, but it was more like basic fundamentals from like Counter Strike stuff. So
Hmm.
I kind of I'd kind of mixed that with what I thought was a lot of Valorant related stuff, and made like a 4 or 5 page document on like different topics, fundamentals, how to play certain concepts like Tataruga, which is like turtle, like how to turtle bomb sites and things like that. So I just really dove deep into the concepts of FPS and how to expand on that, and kind of made that like our learning topics throughout the rest of the year, because these are things that experience and time is what teaches you, not me telling you. So me telling you can open your mind on it, but you going through it is what's going to fortify it in how you play and how you operate. So it was just a mix of that. Like we just needed to understand concepts, and we just needed time to really fortify and send these things home.
Makes sense. Um, I guess I'm kind of curious before we get into a little bit more of last year's stuff, but why Valorant in the first place for you? Like with all the history you had in CS, why did you actually make that switch to a new game?
Super simple question, man. ESL took my spot, you know? Like
Mm,
when they killed off the Pro League division for pretty much all regions, we were in Pro League and NA when I got my first coaching opportunity. They pretty much killed the region, took our spot, gave it to one of their buddies, and there went my opportunity to have a job in NA coaching CS. So
hmm.
um, Valorant immediately came out around that time. COVID kind of hit too at that time. So for me, I understood that there was guys like Volcano and others that were helping the
Mm-hmm.
creation of this game for a long time. So I had kind of had an idea that this game was going to be somewhat like CS, but the League of Legends type model was going to be implemented, which is a completely sustainable thing for the ecosystem of your region. And that's the exact thing that ESL and all those TOs basically ripped apart from all the regions and stuff like that. So opportunity is the reason why I would say I did that. And
Makes
like
sense.
I've said too, I've been a fan and lover of FPS games my whole life. So just really fell in love with this because, and this is not to hate on CS or anything like that. And I think even Fallen mentioned it in an interview in Brazil the other day, is more of like there's just so much shit that goes on in Valorant that's not in Counter Strike, because Counter Strike, same players, same utilities, same all that stuff. In
Right.
Valorant, there's so much stuff, there's so many layers of stuff. And for me, as someone who's not a pro player anymore and someone who is tactically focused and stuff like that, I think that that kind of adds that extra layer of strategy that I really really like. And I cannot wait for there to be like agent bans and stuff like that in the future, because I feel like that's only gonna fortify coaches as like really absolute necessities when it comes to these tactical concepts, because not only the creation of game plans but the ability to like throw teams off and stuff like that. I think for me that's gonna be probably the one of the things that I'm most excited about that can hopefully happen in the near future.
For sure. For sure. Awesome. That makes sense. All right. So speaking of tactics and being able to kind of like utilize those skills, the weekly game schedule had to have been a blessing for somebody like you, where you have like an entire week, you know who your opponent is. Speaking of like the VCT Americas League, um, how much do you like that sort of, you get to game plan for a week, you play a team, then you have the next week to prep for the next team, play a team, etc. Versus sort of more of the open circuit style, like you go into a tournament and you gotta like do, burn the candle at both ends, basically. Like you finish a game, you immediately go into prep and VOD review for the next team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love the tournament side, don't get me wrong, because I feel like that's the ability to show the world that you're a complete team, because you kind of have to have everything set because you have no time. So
Hmm.
when it came to like our process of creating anti-strat strategies, new ideas, all this and that, a tournament is going to show you exactly who the best teams are, because it's who can make adaptations and continue to innovate while you're in the mix. Um, but as you say, I freaking loved that format, because basically it was we played one game a week, so you got
Right.
7 days or 6 days rather. Um, the day immediately after the game, we always took off because we practiced so much. But that day off for the players was not a day off for me. I don't think I took a single day off throughout the whole entire season, because that was my prep day. That was my day where I got to figure out what maps were potentially going to play the other team, create new strategies, start our anti-stratting process for that team. So basically, let's say we played a match on Sunday, we had Monday off. By the end of Monday, we pretty much had an idea of what maps we're playing, how the other team plays all those maps, because I would break down the documents, create like 20, 30-page documents on every single team we were going up against and
Hmm.
pictures, all that stuff. And just have like basically our game plan and set for the next 5 days until we play our opponent, and then we can focus those 4 or 5 days of practice, 3, 4 days of practice, because we usually kind of took it light the day before to really spend that day to review all the stuff that I was making and the anti strats and everything to kind of like mentally prep for our game for the next day to not burn the guys out with practice too much. But basically, it was match. 1 day off for the boys. I pretty much did everything to kind of get ourselves prepped for the next match. And then we spent that whole week basically fine tuning those little details to make sure we were ready for our match. So I think for a team that had amazing players and a coach who was very tactically focused like that, it's a blessing because we basically were given all the time in the world comparison to a tournament to be able to really just expand on all these things. So I think for me it was amazing. Never really had some kind of format like that before, unless like one tournament I went to a long, long time ago, and I really always enjoyed that because I'm so practice focused that I
Hmm.
think that it only just made us stronger as a team to be able to our day off basically have everything kind of like laid out for the rest of the week and our next opponent like pretty much every single week.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the results kind of show the fruit of that as well. So you guys obviously had a very successful regular season. You qualified for Tokyo, and then Tokyo happens, and you guys go out in 2 games. Now, I think what people kind of forget is that you played EG, who ended up being this crazy team on this like the start of their heater,
World
basically,
champs, yeah.
and then EDG, who were way better than expected by most people's standards, I think. So it's not
Yeah.
like you lost to a couple of slouch teams, but obviously the results were not really what everybody else was expecting. So give me a little bit of like what went on with Tokyo. And there's sort of rumors swirling around the team as well. And obviously, the travel is a big thing as well for the young guys, going to another time zone, having to deal with all that. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about Tokyo. I don't have to go into too much drama or anything, but what was that like? And then how do you come back from that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mix of a couple things. We just played teams that were like on fire there. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, a team like EDG was on the rise, and they were playing better and better every single tournament. It's only destiny for them to like start really breaking through and getting into the podium type placements at big events. Then you have a team like EG with a superstar player, brand new superstar player like Demon One. It's like it's hard to really like focus so much on anti-stratting and things like that when they don't even know what they're doing in a way. Like they're learning as they go too, right? So
Right.
um I think we just ran into teams that were on fire that day, but you know, definitely not going to address any rumors or anything like that. But I think that's something that's very publicly known about everything is how the practice situation wasn't optimal. Like the internet was really not that good, and it was just a really big struggle for everyone. And I'm such a practice oriented kind of guy. Regardless of what we do, regardless of what compositions we do, like practice is king. And if we can't get practice, I feel like it's going to be very tough for us. And our practice was just not good,
Hmm.
and it didn't really have anything to do with what we were doing, what I was doing, what the players were doing. A lot of it was like outside circumstances that we were hopefully were not there, but it's really no excuse. We obviously could have put a better foot forward on that tournament, but I just kind of had a bad feeling with the way that our practice was going or lack thereof, and especially the quality just because of the internet. Like playing Valorant with 90% packet loss is practically impossible. Like when I
Yeah.
was playing ranked in from Miami to Brazil with 120 ping, like that was more playable than that because I didn't have loss. When you
Right.
have 90% packet loss, it's like you're skipping, like you teleport, you have no idea what's happening. Like a stray bullet is what's knocking you, is get headshotting you.
Yeah.
So I just really attributed a lot of that, like didn't have quality practice, ran into teams that were just on fire, which they also didn't have quality practice too, right? But some of those teams, those two teams came from the group stage,
Yeah. That's
so
what I
they
just
were
realized.
able,
You guys didn't even have a
yeah,
group stage to warm up, so
yeah,
you're just straight
exactly.
in.
We,
Yeah.
we qualified straight to the playoffs, so we pretty much got thrown into the mix on teams that were already kind of warmed up on stage,
Yep.
realized like maybe practice is not that good, but they kind of got the cobwebs out of their system in the group stage. So, it's what it is. You can't always win, even though I know that our fans and the community wants us to win. And oh my God, Loud not getting top three in a tournament, what a devastation.
Right.
At the end of the day, like we did as best we could with the circumstance. Top eight finish is not terrible, but obviously something that we wanted to kind of prove. I think that people forgot how young of a team we were. We got second at lock-in, dominated Americas, dominated the playoffs. Didn't even drop a map. I think we dropped like one map, or I don't even know if we dropped a map in the playoffs of Americas. And it was like everyone just expected us, like, oh my God, this is a better team than Champs 2022. They're going to win everything. It's like people just really forgot that we were like a brand new team with rookies that had to kind of do everything, go through the fire, just like everyone else did. But I think that with our kind of early success, people really forgot about that. So it was tough, but it was also one of those like learning experiences as well that I think really hit home with the boys, and we were able to have a good next tournament as well.
Yeah, and obviously, I think probably the loss gets blunted a little bit by the fact that you're already pre-qualified for champions, so it's not like a huge stressful. Got to go into the LCQ now. So let's talk about Champions 2023 because I think it probably also helped you guys maybe where the expectations get dropped a little bit at that point, and you're just like another team in the mix. People are looking at the FNATICs and the EGs as maybe potential front runners for champs, and you're not on home soil, but kind of home soil since you're already playing in Americas. What was the Champions LA experience like for you?
It was definitely not home turf for us. I don't
Okay.
think there was a single match that people were cheering for us.
I
I think
sat I sat with the Loud fans for a couple of your matches, and there's a
oh,
tiny little pocket.
yeah,
It's fun.
those 15 people were loud,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the couple hundred other people in the audience, they were definitely not on our side in any match, which is kind of sad. But because Saadhak did mention that in some interview that even though we are an America's team, it doesn't feel like we're getting support from America, but it is
Right.
what it is. Like for us, we've kind of felt good about that aspect, and when we don't do well in Tokyo, you have bullshit and fake rumors coming out. From people like Slasher and stuff like that.
Mhm.
We were marked as a dead team and an underdog immediately, no matter what. So for us, we're like, all right, no problem. This is all fake. We understand how this is how we are as a team. Let's just refocus on ourselves. The spotlight's going to be a little bit away from us, and that's only going to make us feel better about ourselves. That we're coming into this tournament, which is obviously the culmination of our year, with like an underdog mentality rather than like the ones that are expected to win the whole damn thing. So I think that only really helped us out. And just even like the crowd being against us and different things, like it allowed us to just like do what we've been doing all year, which is keep ourselves in our own little bubble and forget about everything that's going on outside. So that really, I appreciate all the rumors and fake stuff that was going out there because that really only strengthened us as a unit. So gave us a really good opportunity to come into a tournament stronger personally, but also, with the spotlight less on us and less pressure.
Right. And then so again, you make it out of group stage. I think that group was crazy. Like it ended up being a very very competitive group. Navi kind of rounded into form finally. DRX was looking good. You guys are in there. Maybe even the hardest group of at a group stage potentially. Um, at what point in that group stage do you think that maybe you could go on a run in this tournament?
Um, I think it would be probably after we played Liquid. Or
Mhm.
actually, I mean, I take it back. Like to be honest, I think the loss against DRX was what was my kind of turning point because even though it had been like 2 or 3 months since we tasted the sweet nectar of victory, um, for me, I was like, okay, like we were so close and we had fixed so many things that we were doing that I think like we're onto something. And when we started to like, we knew that basically we had to beat two European teams to qualify, and um, for me, as someone that I was kind of coaching and teaching these concepts of how to play, especially since 2022 champs, I felt like a lot of what I had been trying to teach the boys was really how to play against the kind of style of play that Europe really
Mhm.
excels at. So I felt like this was going to be our opportunity to really prove to ourselves that we understand how to beat these kinds of teams and how they play. And for me, I just was really excited about that opportunity to be able to really go against teams that have these super structured default, slow default kind of plays. That I was like, the way that we play, the compositions, and the way that I've been really focusing on trying to teach lessons to the boys. This is what's going to be the culmination of all of our work. And if we could just get that one win, it's going to prove to ourselves that like we know what we're up to. And I think that the victory that we ended up having against Liquid kind of proved to us that like, yeah, like this is it. And then we took that over to Navi, which that Navi game was probably the hardest game that we've ever had. I mean, obviously Lock-In was a tough game, the grand finals with Fnatic, but it was basically they stomped us twice, we stomped them twice, and we choked at the end.
Right.
I think the Navi game was probably like a hard fought 13-11 every single match. Like everybody was completely exhausted mentally. Myself, Saadhak, just like thinking of strategies and counters and things like that. Going against guys like Angel who are just like super tactically focused. It was really really tough for us. But once those kind of victories started to come on, like we knew that we were back. And obviously, we started hearing some of the people say the same thing about us, and we didn't really care too much because those same people are the same ones that turn against you and are on your side in this net. So
Right.
we didn't really listen to it too much, but we knew inside that we were onto something. And playing against DRX in group stage is practically impossible. So that was something that we understood that okay, we lost three in a row. Been 3 months since we won a game. Like, because I think it was May. The end of May is when we won Americas, and then like champs was basically in August. So it was literally almost like 2.5, 3 months that we hadn't even felt a W. So
Right.
I knew that we just needed to get over the hump to get that one, and it was gonna kind of reignite that fire in the boys. Not that we didn't have it, but kind of like that confidence that almost felt
Right.
like we were
You got to
starting to slip
feel it.
away. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And then you go on, you go to the upper quarters, you beat Fnatic 2-0. I mean, what is it? And then you end up eliminating Fnatic in the lowers as well. Um, I mean, potentially changing the course of history. Because if it was me looking at the game, I think that Fnatic probably had the leg up on EG out of any of the teams, like the top four. I think if we're talking like
Yeah,
rock
Fnatic
paper
had their
scissors, I'd
number
say
kind of thing. Yeah.
Fnatic beats EG, you guys beat Fnatic, Paper X beats you. Like what is it about Fnatic? Is it just that European style that you're like really good against that allows you to kind of be the only team that could really hand them a tough game all of last year?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, like bluntly put, we dominated them on a lot of those maps. Like
Yeah.
it's not that we just beat them; we dominated them, and I think it was a culmination of like the anti-strat work and the study material that we were doing against them. I think we had an amazing read on everything they were doing. They were the kind of team that they kind of stuck to their guns. Like whatever we knew, whatever that was working for them, they were going to stick to it.
Hmm.
They never lost a Lotus game, but we beat the crap out of them at Lock-In on that
Right.
map. I think we lost both pistols and won like 13-7. So we were the only team in the world that had ever beat them on Lotus, and I think that they were not expecting us to kind of go in there, change stuff around, and do what we did and kind of show them. And we ended up beating them even worse in champs. And I think it was kind of our style of play, but also our read on what they did that like the overall general region style of play that Europe kind of has, but also them. I think that like I said, we just had such a good read on what they do that I think that threw them off. Maybe they can say that they had a bad day, but I think as professionals, we all understand that um, it's not really about having an off day when it comes to skill set. We tactically dominated them, and I think they would agree on that. And the fact that we ended up performing the same way the second time around, that
Hmm.
kind of fortified that we were the better team. And regardless of how the ended up tournament, how the course of history changed, not only were we the better team, but we wanted to kind of take revenge for the fact that we lost Lock-In in the way that we did.
For sure.
So we had been dreaming of that revenge match for ever since February. So for us, it was like give us Fnatic anywhere, anytime, and thank God it happened twice at champs because we were ready for them for the whole year.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I remember I was in the post game press conference after you guys went out to EG in the lower final, and honestly, you guys didn't seem all that down. Everybody seemed like it sucks, like you can't win back to back titles, but it seems like everybody was like pretty even, at least. Like we came in with like kind of middling expectations. We beat probably the best team in the world. I mean, it's hard to argue them versus EG. Obviously, EG wins champs, but I would say all of 2023, FNATIC was the best team in the world. You beat them twice, you knocked them out. You play EG extremely close. They go on and kind of stomp Paper X in the final. So I mean, arguably, you guys are like the second best team there. Like, you know, who knows how that ranking actually looks, but yeah, I guess like maybe final thoughts on champions. Like, were expectations relatively met? It's hard to say, you know, without winning that you're satisfied, but um yeah, I guess just talk to me a little
Yeah.
bit about the end of the 2023 season there.
I mean, going into champs, I think everyone thought that we were going to get last place. So
Hmm.
automatically for us, like we had a successful run. And once we lost and we got eliminated from the tournament, we realized like, damn, we got third place. Like we still made a podium finish in a tournament that like no one expected us to even be competitive at. I think the guys felt like a sense of relief, like because as the tournament kept going on, we're like, oh crap, like we can actually win this thing. Like we're gonna
Hmm.
win champs. And then it was like, okay, we didn't win champs, man, we got so close. So I think it was one of those things of like, you also got to understand, and this is something that Fnatic brought up, and that's a very good point. The best teams in the world, like they're the ones that play the most, they're the ones that travel the most, they're the ones that
Hmm.
go through like so much travel, exhaustion, all this stuff. So for us, once we got eliminated, I was like, oof, our year is done. Like we basically spent like the last like 7 8 months away from our families, practicing nonstop, not really having any breaks. um
Right.
I think it was just kind of like a sense of relief of like, man, like, like these are things that maybe they kind of hit us a little bit more like a week or a couple days after the tournament, that I was like, man, we actually had a sense of like a really really good year, much further than anyone ever expected from us, from day one to even that towards the end. And I think that what you guys saw in our faces in the press conference is that kind of that sad slash happiness of like, we really felt like we could make a run here, but also we were very satisfied with the way that we were able to do it. Like it kind of ended the same way as Lock-In did, which was we were getting stomped and we ended up almost turning it around. So it was like we fought to the very last minute. We didn't give up. We never let anyone kind of take us down in that way and kind of embarrass us. Like obviously Tokyo was, bad because we didn't even take a map on anyone. I don't even know if we got double digits on any map over there. So it's like that kind of felt like we didn't even go there. But when it came to all the other tournaments and even the losses that we got eliminated from, champs and lock-in, we're like, man, we put on a show out there, much better than to lose 3-0, because when we can like potentially make a reverse sweep and lose at the very very end, you let the other teams know that this is a team that they're not easy to take down. And I think that that was something that we felt just very happy about, that we were able to give it our all, and also that sense of relief of like it's finally over, like we can rest now.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And then I guess how did it feel to see another sort of like CS legend lift the trophy with Potter taking it all the way? Did that feel good? Or do you
Yeah,
have like a
yeah.
relationship with her at all?
Yeah. Potter's cool people. I've known her for a very long time. We have some pretty cool stories together. Even just when I lived over, and I moved, my parents practically did not want me to be playing video games. Kind of kicked me out the house when I was like 18, 19 years old. So I moved from Florida to Texas, and I stayed there for like 6 7 years. And me and Potter are always like close friends because she was competing at a very high level, winning majors while I was doing the same thing.
Hmm.
And just even shared a lot of bonds. Like when I moved back to Florida, she let me stay at her house for a couple days, while I didn't have an apartment because I had my lease was over, and my flight wasn't until a couple days, right? So
Hmm.
I always tell the story because I'm eternally grateful for her being there for me in like very tough moments. And this was like 2012, like 11 years ago in those things. So me and Potter have an amazing relationship. I was super excited. I mean, that's, you see most coaches this shit fist bump or whatever. You probably always see me and her give a hug on stage because we
Right.
just kind of have that relationship. And when you're good friends, fist bumps are not good enough. Sometimes you got to give a hug. So yeah, I was very excited for her. I was very happy. And I wish her all the success. And obviously, that maybe who knows what's going on with EG right now, but I'm sure she'll find her way and be able to replicate the success she had, because she's an amazing coach, amazing person. And I think that the people in the world are kind of seeing what she's able to do, especially with some young talent. So really like the fact that an old school player and also a friend was able to lift that trophy because we kind of do think about the game and the approach a little bit similar, I think.
Awesome, awesome. That's really cool to hear. I know you've got a pretty hard out to get to practice here, so I've just got like one or two more questions for you. Um, so I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about a couple specific players, and sort of your opinions on them and how they affect the game. So the first one is Saadhak. I know you've just kind of like praised him endlessly for his flexibility and just his ability to lead a team and stuff like that. What is it like working with somebody who he's kind of like the elder statesman on the team with a bunch of young guys, and just seems to have like such a like carefree approach to just like being a pro, but also is like a killer in the server. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about Saadhak as a player.
Yeah, Sadak is a great guy. I mean, everyone calls him the dad, and they call me the grandfather, so therefore he's my son. Like we are from the same cloth. Like we get along very well. Have a great relationship with him. I think one of the main things that I kind of told him early on is like I really want to help extend your career, because I don't want him to retire or anything like that. So like just throw all the work on my plate so I can help extend his career. So for me, I just really wanted to help him out, do everything I could to help him extend his career, like I said, and he's such a smart guy, and he also understands how to lead a team, be like a politician in that way, kind of like understand everyone and all that stuff. And he's also good at delegating those things. So with me, we work so well because he was able to give me that kind of direction. Like I need new this, I need new that, I need new this. I was like, no problem, done, 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 done. So I think that our working relationship was fantastic, especially because not only do we think about the game in the same way, kind of having like, but we balance each other out, right? Like he would cook a lot, and I was also a little bit of a cook, but I kind of like bring him down to earth in some of these cases. So I think a lot of it came down to us being kind of that yin and yang, like different. I'm kind of a more intense personality. He's more of a chill personality. So we just balance each other out very well. Sadik is probably one of the coolest guys and just greatest minds I've ever met in the game. And I think that's why we work well together because I felt like we share a lot of those qualities, and he was able to have that respect for me to allow myself to be myself, and um, kind of just balance him out. And we would spend endless hours debating stuff, like talking about different points, whether it was good or bad. It was always out of respect and just pure like intelligence, like trying to like both of us discuss our side and coming to some consensus to how we want to approach the game and approach the team. And I think it was just like a really really good balance, especially because we both kind of operate the same way, but since we are so different in some ways, that really made us like really really good complements to each other.
Makes sense. Okay, and then on the other side of the coin, we've got this interesting game where it kind of seems like these crazy young talents, like the Aspas, like the Demon One, the somethings, these types of players have the ability to have like an almost like outsized impact on round to round, and like even in like the game changers, so you've got like Fluorescent, this type of player who can just kind of like take over 5-6 rounds a half potentially and just win them for you. How do you feel about these types of players, and how do you feel about the game in general that allows this type of thing to happen with agents like Jet and Chamber in the past, and like uh, I guess like
Yeah,
what is your
it's all
perspective
yeah,
on that
it's
type of
it's all-
thing?
it's all about the op, man. Like the
Yeah.
op is such a dominant gun in CS and in Valorant and stuff like that. And with some of these guys, especially like Aspas, who's the one that I was working with for a couple years, is like I was exactly who you were back in the day. Like I was
Mhm.
an aggressive op that people were like, "What the hell is this guy doing? He's just running around no scoping people. What the f?" And like I understand exactly what it's like to be that 16, 17-year-old up and coming player that's showcasing your talent to the world and dominating rounds. So I think that we kind of share those qualities. So for me, we speak that same language, and I think that that's why me and Aspas were able to work so well together because he. It's not really hard for me to help him become better because he's already an insanely gifted player. Like this kid is brilliant. Like he gets into that flow state mindset and like just autopilot dominates. Like he's so good. And for me, it was more about like fine tuning some of these skill sets to let him know that you are the best in the world, but there's so much more that you can do, that you can be like the best player ever kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so my job was to really show them those kind of things. And like I said, since I had been through that and gone through that kind of similarity, like the similar way of thinking and playing, like it's not that difficult for me to help him specifically as an individual player, because that's pretty much my approach to the game the whole time. And yeah, that's pretty much kind of it, because for me, I had been through that. It's not like something like I'm watching other people do something and I'm trying to explain to you and have to gain that respect. Like, I was that guy when I was younger, so I've been there, done that. And I guess, having a coach that's been there, done that, you kind of have that natural respect for them. And even though I'm 37 years old, they know I can go in the server and still headshot them to this day. So it's one of these things that it's like, okay, this guy obviously has something that he understands about this game and the way that he approaches his day to day on FPS, that I should take a couple things from that. So it's a mix of both, of and also having someone like Aspas who does have an open mind, doesn't have an ego like that, and is willing to just like take on that advice and kind of slowly realize like, oh crap, like this guy's like really helping develop my game. I'm gonna just listen to what he says, and for them to understand that, like I said before, I have the best interest at heart for them. I don't care to be the best at anything. Like, my job is to make you the best, and I'm not going to tell you to do something that I feel like you're going to fail at. I'm going to tell you something that I feel like it's going to help you and develop your game to the next level. And if they have that kind of faith in me, then I think over time they'll eventually see that. And I think that that's why me and Aspas were able to have such a fantastic relationship, because my focus was on making him a better player, an even better player than he was at the time. So yeah, it was just like a big focus of mine to help these guys individually. And I never really played the role of like a lurker and other things. I was exactly like Aspas. So
Mhm.
I think that that's why we were able to speak the same language from day one.
Gotcha. Okay, so the future of Valorant, and it's only going to get more complex from here. How do you feel about the current state of the game? Is it stale? Does it need some help? Do people just need to be more creative? Where do you think the game might go? And then I guess how does that sort of tie into what you're hoping to bring to MIBI this year to kind of like finish out the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping eventually gets to that agent pick and ban type stuff, just so it adds that extra element of strategy, which hopefully we can start seeing in some of these off-season tournaments. But I think that's probably down the line, and I'm really excited for that. I'm kind of a little sad. I think the last couple agents that were released aren't really too good. Um,
No
so
love
for
for
me,
ISO.
I mean, ISO has a lot of potential, but I think
Yeah,
that it's all about like who you're going to sacrifice for that. Where
right,
can you find the fit? ISO is like a combo agent. You need to combinate with like combo with someone else. Like his invulnerable abilities and his stuff. Like, it is kind of selfish in nature, which is fine for a duelist. But the reality is that they're not really as impactful. So maybe comboed with the right agents and stuff. Like, I've always been a firm believer that when you want to fit an agent in, like Gecko, Harbor, ISO, Deadlock, like you got to create comps around them. You can't just slot them into what you're doing already.
right,
Um, and I just don't think that they're ready to be slotted in place of other agents. I think the other agents are just still that much better. And then when you talk about like the combination, because like maybe no one would have thought like Harbor, Viper, Sky are even good. Sky got nerfed to the ground. Harbor's brand new and all. He's like he's a water man, like what the hell can he do? Um, it's like, oh, like you can combo. I don't think, like, even though I've tried and I've thought, and me and guys like Saadhak have sat back and thought a lot. I mean, obviously Deadlock and ISO kind of came out, or Deadlock came out, but everyone knew that she's pretty bad, and ISO came out after I was let go from Loud, so I never really got to like theory craft with him. But I think a lot of it just boils down to these agents are not like ready for high level competitive play. Like,
Mhm,
there is some stuff that there's potential there, but I don't think the potential is enough to overcome like what's already kind of been dominated. And sometimes you need that agent or that big wave of nerf to kind of change the meta. And I think that everything that's happened throughout this year and so far is not really like game breaking. Like, maybe the new Cypher stuff can be good, but Cypher and Killjoy has never been a problem. It's always been more of like who's better on what map and maybe what player plays what agent better.
right.
But that doesn't really change the meta, as kind of what we're discussing. So I don't know. I'm really hoping that they tweak these agents. Like, they need sometimes they need to just reset the whole kit. Like, you already Deadlock's out there in the world. Everything of her abilities are bad. Just reset them all. Just make something brand new. Like whatever agent they were thinking about, just port all those abilities over.
Sure.
So it's like, I think that until that they make these agents to a level where they can be executed at a pro level, combined with other people that can um change metas and make other agents more viable. Like you can't be like, all right, let's look at Gecko and Deadlock. Like doesn't fit. Gecko ISO, like things like that. Like you can't really like think too much. And if you want to put some of these agents in the mix with what you're doing right now, you may have to fine tune some stuff to kind of make that work. And even then, I just don't really see it. Like when you look at duelists, you see agents that their ultimates can dominate a whole round, not just dominate one individual.
Right.
When I think of ISO, I think of like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, ISO in basketball, like just everyone get out of the way, 1v1. It's like that doesn't really fit in gaming like that, where it's like
Yeah.
take a 1v1 and okay, maybe you cancel Viper ult. Maybe you can win on time because you put someone into the Astral world or whatever, It's like at the end of the day, like you're going to use your ultimate solely for those kind of purposes. It really doesn't have that kind of round impact that maybe other agents have. And, I think that once you start seeing some of these agents be a little bit more team oriented rather than so individually focused, maybe will change. But just hoping that either the new agents that come out in the future or the reworks they have on these agents that never get played, I'm really hoping that that kind of comes out alongside agent picks and bans, because you could do agent picks and bans now and you're going to force people to play like some really terrible ideas. Whereas, if you have diversity in compositions, I think you're going to force teams to have like, this week we're going to practice team A, which is our optimal comp, and then next week we're going to practice, team B, which is our what if we get banned on our best agent? What are we going to do next?
Right. Yeah, man, I'll have to have you back on another episode just to talk purely about theory crafting for another couple hours at some point.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I guess last thing I just want to ask is, what's in store for you this year? What are expectations for MIBR? And just kind of like, yeah, any sort of final thoughts on what's coming for you in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, our expectations are to win. I don't come into this with the mindset of like just being a competitor, just being part of the process. Obviously, we know it's a tough road. Obviously, we know we have a lot of things against us, but our goal is to win. Our goal is to qualify for tournaments internationally and to be very, very competitive. So that's kind of my mindset. That's what I'm bringing to the team. I'm very excited for this opportunity to be with MIBR. I think that the players are very talented. Bazooka's a very good coach, and he's going to be he's the head coach and I'm basically like a head coach alongside with him in the sense like title doesn't matter. He's given me the ability to do whatever the hell I want at any moment, adjust the practice schedules, adjust our approach day to day, tactically, compositions, out of game, everything. So he's given me total freedom to do whatever I feel is necessary for the team to be successful. And that's what I love about him because he understands who I am. We've known each other for a long time, and he brought me on board to let me do what I feel is best, not to really like kind of have it be his way. He's very adaptable as well. So I think that we make a really good team when it comes to the coaching staff, and I think that he put together a pretty good squad here as well. And I think that a lot of people are going to be kind of shocked at how we approach the game and how some of these new players are kind of transitioning and playing. So, it's our goal to, you know, let people know that we're a brand new team and to make sure that we can qualify for some tournaments. So really excited for, like I said, the opportunity, but really excited to start getting the ability to compete at a kind of international stage or even like the Americas or LOCKIN or the kickoff tournament, because I feel like we're on the right path. And um, a lot of teams are going through different stuff. A lot of teams still don't even have their rosters figured out. I think for us, like we've already figured out our roster. We've been boot camping, or about to be boot camping for almost a month. So I think that as long as we kind of keep this focus on our practice and our culture, I think that only success will come our way. And even if we fall short in some things, I feel like we'll feel like it's a success because we've given it all we had, or we've given it all we have. And that's something that I'm kind of demanding from the boys, which is basically just give me 100 and I'll give you 100. It's going to be like a really good year that we're working together.
Awesome, fRoD. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it and all the insight and everything. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for all
appreciate.
that, and best of luck this year. Can't wait to see you guys play in 2024, and you know, go back to work, I guess, and get to practice.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, if you ever want to chit chat about the game and stuff like that, always available. And really appreciate your time. And thanks for all you do as well.